Good morning, everyone. Our first speaker of the day is Mrs. Setta Tutundijan. She is the Director of Partnerships and Knowledge Management at the International Center for Biosaline Agriculture. She has over 20 years of experience in development, primarily in water, agriculture, environment, and energy. We're going to watch a short clip before we invite Mrs. Tutundijan on stage. Please put your hands together for Mrs. Setta Tutundijan.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's my pleasure to be with you today to speak about something very close to my heart, which is sustainability, and sustainability for real change. So this is. Okay. So I think if you try to imagine the last few years and think about, has there been a week or even a day that has passed by and you haven't, if you're watching the TV, you haven't heard the word environment, climate change, pollution, biodiversity loss, typhoons, floods, droughts. On a daily basis, we hear about these issues. Yet if we think about ourselves, we have been living on this planet for millions of years. And during that time, we have evolved from very primitive societies to the advanced societies that we live in today. Medicine has come forward, technologies have improved our living standards. So really, many people ask me, what's all the fuss about? So this is our planet. When the first mission went to the moon in the 60s, and they took this picture of the planet and sent it back home. And the realization hit many of the experts that our planet is finite. We have only one planet and one pool of resources. So when we pollute one area, the trend has been we pollute one area, we move to the next area, and that it would be infinite. We would be doing that continuously for our development. But people suddenly realized, no, it is one planet that we have. It is our planet, it's planet A. We don't have an alternative. We did hear about 2 planets that have already been discovered by NASA that could possibly be a replica of planet Earth, but I think it's going to be hundreds, if not thousands of years before we can discover how we can get there. So I'd like you to bear with me a small exercise. I'd like you to close your eyes and then imagine your home, the home that you're currently living in with your family. Picture your family waking up in the morning, getting ready to go to university, preparing your meals, coming back from school, having your time with the family, watching TV. Now picture you living in the same house, but suddenly your family is double in size. So instead of being 5, you're 10 people living in the same house, waking up the same morning with the same number of bathrooms, the same facilities at home. Now picture your family is another time double the size. And try to imagine what your daily lives will be like. So this is the population trend globally. If we look at it, up until the 18th century, population levels globally have never gone above 1 billion people. And the growth has been very minimal. It was less than 0.5%. In the last 200 years, we have grown from 1 billion people living in this earth to 7.3 billion people. So when you were imagining yourselves in the house, I made you do the multiplication 3 times. We've exceeded that. We've grown beyond 650%. In the last 100 years alone, since 1900 to 2000, global population levels have increased 3 times that of humanity ever. So from the people living today, the 7.3 billion people living on Earth, 6.5% of people ever born throughout history live at this very moment. Together with that expansion in population growth, the last 200 years, we underwent what was called the Industrial Revolution. We now move to the technological revolution, but that was going on. And during the Industrial Revolution, we used coal, then fossil fuel. We emitted a lot into the air pollution. We emitted a lot of pollution into our water streams. So the Industrial Revolution brought with it enormous environmental degradation. It brought with it as well enormous technological advances, enormous health advances. So I'm not going to touch on those, but I don't want to disregard them. But it brought with it a lot of environmental consequences. And additional to the environmental consequences, during the Industrial Revolution, as humans and as society, our value system shifted. We suddenly moved from primitive lifestyles that were self-sufficient, that were with low consumption levels, to advanced societies, to urban societies, which are characterized by a consumptive pattern. We went from producing what we need to producing, consuming, and throwing away. And the environmental consequences, I'll share with you a few pictures, have been enormous. We're producing enormous tons of waste. Living in Dubai, we might not be seeing those or experiencing that, but in other countries in the world, such as this one, this picture is from Bangladesh, but if you move throughout our planet, there are many areas that are characterized by air pollution and by waste that is killing the environment and the ecosystems. There is smog in many cities. So this picture is from Beijing, where small particle pollution is 40 times that of international health standards. But from the 7.3 billion people, according to the 2016, this year's report of the Global Environmental Index, half of the world population is exposed to polluted air. So this picture is not only of Beijing. It's just, it became a sign, a symbol of pollution. Another thing that we've been doing is we've been dumping our waste into the ocean. And the ocean has currents, and those currents form that waste into garbage patches. So that's a small picture, but there are many of those garbage patches in the ocean. The largest one being the Great Pacific Garbage Patch. So if you look at it from above, from satellite images, you will not see it. You will need to go below the water. So what the scientists have been doing, they have been measuring to try to decide what is the size of this garbage patch. So this one, which is the Great Pacific one, it ranges in size. The most modest estimations is that it is the size of Texas, and with estimations going up that it is 2 times the size of the United States continent. So I'm talking not only the United States, but as a continent. With dire consequences on the environment. I'm sure you saw on social media a lot of pictures being shown, but these are not isolated incidents. There are incidents that are being repeated on a daily basis. So in our new consumption pattern, our food diets have changed. We are relying much more on meat, plus our numbers are increasing. And this has led us to go and pursue new agricultural lands. So we have been logging our forests, which are, we symbolize them, they are the lungs of the planet, to produce our food. So today, half of the forests that were originally there on our planet have been logged down. And from that logging down, only 7% can be certified as sustainable. Many people believe that we log down the forest, they cut some of the trees, they plant other ones instead of them. Well, the predominant way of logging down forests is burning them. So by burning them, you're not using the timber, you're destroying the whole ecosystem and everything in it, and you're releasing a lot of CO2. You're not only eliminating the capacity of Earth to absorb CO2 and release oxygen, but you're also releasing CO2 in the process. So I think the most known and referred to incident in the media is climate change. We're all feeling the climate change. If you've been following anything in the news, you would notice that for 2016, each month has been breaking historical records. And before 2016, I'd like you to guess which was the hottest year on record. 2015, yes. And before that, it was 2014, and before it, it was 2013. I think for 12 years in a row, every year breaks the previous record. So in total numbers, like I sit in discussions and they tell me, oh, they're estimating 1 degree or 2 degrees. What does that matter? Sometimes in Dubai, we said it's 50 degrees. I come from Jordan, 40, 45, we experience that. So people say it's not a big deal. In Europe, you visit them and they say, oh, we'll have better climate. But it is because with this 1 degree, the ice caps are melting. When the ice caps melt, they make the ocean colder. So the currents in the ocean become colder, the currents in the air become colder, and we have extreme climatic events. So when we experience droughts, it's not the usual drought. When we have typhoons, it's not the usual typhoon. And you've seen on television, I'm sure, what the replication or the implications of such extreme events are. Another thing that is not so evident is what it's doing in the environment. A 1% degree change in the environment is leading that animals' breeding seasons are changing. Plants' flowering seasons are changing. A lot of seasonal plants are disappearing. And one aspect that's a little bit unclear to scientists what the ramifications will be is that the genetic composition of organism is changing. So if we look at the normal fruit fly that we all see, when they're tracing it, the genes of that fruit fly has changed during the past 5-6 years. And for us, we really don't know what the implications will be. So what can we do to stop this? And what is our role? Because we all have a role. As individuals, we have a role. As organizations, we have a role. And as societies, we have a role. And it starts all with, as I mentioned before, during the Industrial Revolution, we had a shift in our values as societies. We moved to a value system that is produce, consume, and discharge. So what the experts are saying is we currently are at a phase where we need to move to a value system of reduce, reuse, and recycle. We've been hearing a lot about recycle, but it's become evident that recycle by itself is not going to solve our problem. We need to move to a value system whereby we reduce our consumption, we reduce our need for natural resources, and then we reuse those. Whatever we're taking from the environment, we try to reuse it to the maximum, and then we recycle it, and we discharge minimum waste into the environment again. And I will not cover recycle. I will cover a little bit the reduce aspect because it is things that we can incorporate into our daily lives. And so I have a few slides. They're not exhaustive. I hope you find them enlightening. So the first one is reducing what we eat. We eat 3 to 5 meals a day, depending on our pattern. And by reduce here, I don't mean reduce the size of the meals or reduce the number of the meals, but it is diversifying our food diet. If we reduce our meat consumption and incorporate a little bit more of a plant diet into our daily pattern, we will be impacting the environment much in a positive way. To produce 1 calorie of meat protein, we release 9 times more fossil fuel than producing a similar 1 calorie of plant protein. Livestock, they release around 51% of total greenhouse gas emissions. So cars are important, but our diets release as much gases into the environment. Another thing is that more than 25% of the land, the agricultural land, is used for grazing. So when we say we lock down our forests, we're using them to have livestock grazing in them or to produce animal feed. Another simple thing that we can incorporate daily is the temperatures of the rooms that we are living in, we are working in. If we reduce the temperature, how much we're cooling our houses by 1 degree, we're actually reducing our energy between 1 and 3%. So we are reducing CO2 emissions. And cold temperatures, it's the same. If they reduce the amount of heating, they're also saving. Our choices as consumers play a big role. When we go to the market, to the supermarket, we decide consciously that we are going to buy products that are green, we are sending as consumers a very clear message to the industry that green is what we want. And industry follows the money. So where the consumers lay the boundaries of what is acceptable for them, the industry will follow. By businesses and offices, it's the same. You are currently in university, soon you will be graduating, you will be joining the workforce. By trying to incorporate into the organizations that you work, that a green culture is what is required, you would be, in fact, initiating change. Reuse is another thing. And here today, I thought that there's more industry in. So I put that in. It was mainly targeted towards industry. So by reuse in industry, I was referring to there needs to be some pressure on industry that when they produce items, they need to think about the reduce and reuse culture. When I grew up, I come from a different generation. I remember we had the same TV at home for 10 years. Our telephone was there for 12 years. When something broke down, we took it, we fixed it. So 4 months ago, my printer at home broke down. So I took it to the market, and I asked for it to be fixed, and was surprised to learn that it would be cheaper for me to buy a new printer than to fix mine. Then I would have to pay the price of a new printer with no guarantees that my printer would be fixed. The same for a mobile phone. If you break your screen and you go to fix it, you discover that with 200 extra dirhams, you get the newest release of the mobile. It's really not worth it to fix it. So there needs to be some kind of a shift in this mentality. To produce one mobile or one TV or one printer, there's a lot of resources and a lot of pollution went into it. So if we continue this trend, we're actually exhausting our capital. So nature, we can look at it, some even economists have suggested, let's quantify nature, let's value it, let's put a monetary figure on it so that people understand that it's more of a bank account that we're drawing down on. But the challenge was, how do you value it? My value system is different than the person next to me. Even within families, we have different value systems. So it goes back to what our priorities are. But in terms of scientists and experts and economists currently, there is a clearer understanding with each report that is issued by the Intergovernmental Panel for Climate Change, which is issued every 4 years, and every 4 years the figures are even more daunting than the previous one. There is an understanding now that we need to shift towards a more circular economy. So when we talk about circular economy, it's an economy based on the reduce concept. It's based that once you draw out from your capital, natural capital, you keep reusing it until it is exhausted, and then you recycle. And then what you discharge in terms of pollution is tremendously minimized. And as I mentioned, there are roles for each of us, whether it's individuals, institutions. So I'd like to spend the last few minutes of my presentation to go over what we as a center are doing. This is the center where I work in. It's called the International Center for Biosaline Agriculture. It is an initiative by the United Arab Emirates government together with the Islamic Development Bank. We were established in Dubai in 1999. We've been around for a while, although we haven't been very active in the UAE. We've been active more regionally and globally, but we're looking towards changing that. As a center, what we work on is we have a team of scientists that's their daily task is to try to find solutions and new technologies and ways of doing things that will help the global efforts of mitigating and adapting to climate change. So we work primarily in the agricultural field, and we work towards food security, nutritional security, water security, and dealing with especially farmers and families that try to produce agriculture in what we call marginal environments. To bring it closer to home, marginal environments are environments such as the environment of the United Arab Emirates. So there are hot climates, arid climates, where the soil properties are a little bit poorer in nutrition, where the climate conditions are quite harsh, where usually it's not the place to go to do agriculture in the traditional way of doing it. So I'll cover some of the innovations that we've been doing. We work a lot on crop diversification. So throughout history, as humans, we have relied on around 500,000 plants that composed our diet throughout history. With the start of the Industrial Revolution, that diet pool has been limited, and increasingly so year by year. Today, if we look at our diet of plant food, we went down from that 500,000 to four. Four crops compose 60% of our diet. And in general, we don't consume more than 100 plants. So at the center, what we do is we go back to the nature, to the environment such as the UAE environment. We screen the native plants. These plants are usually, they are resistant to drought. They require much less water to grow. They can grow in very hot conditions. They can grow with poorer quality water. So if the water is a little bit salty, like the groundwater in this area, they can still grow in it, and they produce much better. And we work on these types of plants because we believe that these plants will be a key to our future survival. So among these plants that we currently work intensively on is quinoa. I hope everyone in the room has heard about quinoa, because currently it's being considered a superfood because it has a lot of nutritional value, much more than the other staple crops that we are using. But we also work on other crops that might be less familiar to you, like sorghum, pearl millet. These are also very nutritional variety crops that are very suitable for environments such as these. We have in the UAE actually a unique gene bank. So in this gene bank, we have a collection of seeds that we preserve for future generations, because as ecosystems change and as we have more environmental degradation and climate change, we're losing a lot of plant species. So in this gene bank, we're conserving some of these species. We have more than 13,000 species that are conserved here. This is a unique feature for the United Arab Emirates. There's not many gene banks that have a similar pool of the seeds that we have. Our seeds are mainly drought and salt resistant seeds. We also work a lot on researching with alternative water. There's not much fresh water around in marginal environments, so we work to try to see how we can grow crops with treated wastewater, with brackish groundwater, with reject water from mining. When you mine, whether it is for oil, whether it is for phosphate, you produce a lot of water that is chemically polluted that you cannot reuse for other uses. We use plants to purify that water and then enable it to be used, at least in agroforestry, if not for food production. We also experiment with seawater. So if you do happen to come to our premises, which is in the academic city, you will find plants that are grown with pure seawater. We also use the latest technology and computing model to model the changes, to try to understand the water dynamics. and try not only to see what the current weather patterns are, but try to predict and forecast what they would be. And we use that data to provide decision makers with information that can help them prepare for what's coming. Morocco this summer experienced one of the hottest droughts ever. And with the assistance that was provided by the scientists here, we were able to alert the governments a few months in advance that this is coming. So instead of trying to adapt to it or to have a crisis situation, as a government, they were able to prepare for it and to talk with farmers before the crisis started. And the last thing, we work a lot on soil. We try to look at how we can enhance the soil properties. We work on composting. I'm going to cover biochar here because biochar is something that we're currently focusing a lot on. Biochar is, it's something like coal. So you've all lived in communities in this area, and you've seen that in some seasons we cut down or we prune trees. And this waste is usually burned. So what we do is we have a unit at the center where we burn it in special ovens at 0 oxygen levels. We don't release any CO2 in the atmosphere, but a byproduct is we have this coal that when you put in the soil, it releases nitrogen, which is very beneficial for plants, but it also retains moisture, so you need much less water to grow your food. And the nice thing about biochar is that it also sequesters, or what sequesters the other, it absorbs CO2 from the ocean. So it is a mechanism to reduce the CO2 that is available in the atmosphere. So this was discovered, as biochar was discovered around 10, 15 years ago, and it is a new technology that we're trying to work on. In closing, I'd like to leave you with a picture of Earth, because this is your home, it's my home, it's our family's home, and it's the only home we have. So as we try to preserve our home of bricks, we need to try to preserve our Earth as well. Thank you.